Well, g'day, and welcome back to Just Another Solar Podcast. My name's Nigel Morris. I'm not Luke Beattie. He's away this week, can't make it. So I am filling in as Commander-in-Chief in today's episode. Forgive me if I'm not as smooth as the Beattie. The rest of our team are here, though, of course. G'day, Karl. How's it going?
Industry legend Nigel Morris. I am cold and windy down here in Melbourne.
Cold and windy, mate. Can I tell you, I checked before and it was 29.6 degrees and a low wind where I am in Sydney.
Can't use swear words, otherwise we get, bumped into a different category of podcast. But, you can see what I'm envisaging I should be saying.
Okay. Generations down, bills are up. I don't have solar, as everybody knows. I'm still trying to work on that and sort that out. But I don't have cooling. We've got a sea breeze at my place. So I love summers, don't like winters. We've got a good guest joining us in a minute, Karl. But I thought we should jump in and just talk about what's going on. How's the world for you out there? You're doing your iSolar thing, and the market's kind of weird but fun. There's lots of innovative stuff coming on. There's new brands coming in everywhere. What's going on for you, man?
Well, we talked about it before we started. I think it was a couple of days this week where I was going to put a post on Facebook and say, hey, this is the day to use some power, because it looks like renewables are going to be 65, 70%, and energy rates for our retailers around midday are going to be -5, -10 cents. And then I looked at the forecast and thought, well, maybe it's not going to be today, but you've actually got the data, Nigel, and someone's written an article about it.
Giles Parkinson has, of course, always on the money. A story from his website. I'll quote, because it's another record. We hear about records all the time, but the AEMO reported that operational demand in Australia's main grid, the NEM, hit a new winter low of just 12.1 gigawatts. Right? 12.1. Traditionally, historically, for example, it was usually around 40, 50. That's kind of the rough capacity. It goes up and down a bit over time. But, just to give you an example, a winter low of 12 megawatts.
Gigawatts.
That was on Saturday. Sorry, gigawatts, yeah. Rooftop solar killing it, 46.5%, Karl, from rooftops.
Yeah, it's awesome. Obviously, that's people taking control of their own energy situation. Cost of living crisis makes absolute sense. I had a customer, actually, Ben, Solar Pro in Bendigo. He said to me that his pitch to customers is that you can either, if you're spending $3,000, $4,000 a year on electricity and gas, you can either spend it on somebody else, or you can spend a portion of it with me, but that's 40 grand over 10 years. So we should probably be looking at
the numbers.
Something that covers your needs for the next 10 years. And if it costs 30 grand, then you're 10 grand ahead.
Simple maths. I love it.
Simple maths.
The basic proposition is there. I couldn't agree more. And it's just getting better and better. We're seeing great competition in the battery space. But, back to the record, what blew my mind was the curtailment, right? And this is an issue close to my heart because, as you know, catch power now. I'm all about catch power. And one of the cool things that we can do is a whole lot of inverter, battery, load, everything else control and orchestration, right? So we're looking at curtailment as an issue, whether it's regulatory curtailment or whether it's user curtailment or whether it's whatever. That's part of the world that we live in. And during this event on Saturday, get this, winter low was 12.1 gigawatts of demand, right? 2.3 gigawatts of wind and solar were available at the time, but was curtailed. So basically what they do is tell big solar farms somewhere out in Western New South Wales, ramp down, and they ramp them down. And the total ramp down was 2.3 gigawatts. At the same time, there was 2.3 gigawatts of coal generating. So the amount of curtailed renewables could have actually offset coal had it been able to respond in time and, the market been able to do its thing in a modern way, which it can't.
Yeah, that's a shame. I think I'll probably mention this a dozen times, but the almighty Elon Musk said that gas peaker plants are low-hanging fruit for battery storage. So you're talking gas peakers at $390 a megawatt hour, and commercial battery storage at less than $200 a megawatt hour.
And you sent me the most fascinating ad from how much? That was a residential storage system. How much was it?
Yeah, it was $300 a kilowatt hour. It wasn't a
300
brand
kilowatt hour installed?
No, that was just the hardware.
The
That
hardware,
was
but the
from a
complete
wholesaler.
kit
But
for hardware.
nonetheless, there's a lot of talk out there in the market as to, why home batteries haven't come down in cost. And I'm still a believer that quality solutions are worth the money because they work properly and you've got some decent data and you can see it working properly and so on. So Tesla still takes the cake in that space. Everything works in that ecosystem very well. And I think that it's a bit like the cheap Chinese car versus the Tesla. Still might get the job done. It's just not as pleasant to sit behind the wheel.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, mate. And what about the vibe in the market? I'm getting such mixed messages when I talk to people around the market about what's going on. And everyone's feeling the cost of everything pressure. Solar sales, solar installs, it's kind of bumbling along.
It's definitely bumbling along. Just looked at the data for the Tesla. I put 1,000 kilowatt hours through it for the month. So uses 20 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks. So I've done 5,000 Ks in the thing. I've managed to get around a fair portion of the state. And I'm not hearing the doom and gloom. And so that's very, very positive. Also, as you say, new solutions in the battery space. Ultimately, Redback's disappeared. And this week, Red Flow has also disappeared, which is a bit of a shame because
that was a big one. Yeah. Interesting technology. That was a flow technology. They'd been at it for like 10 or 15 years, man. Simon Hackett was involved, pumping heaps in. They've been just chipping away at it, but they just couldn't quite get there. The other one, actually, speaking of that stuff, was Planet Ark. Went down sort of second time round. They were sort of nearly gone last year, and a lot of questions being asked and changes in some structure, and they appointed liquidators recently, so they've gone as well. And there's a bunch of familiar names from the industry have been impacted by that. $4.7 million owing to creditors, so another fairly big one. I also jumped on, and I haven't done this for ages. I just like to get a sense of what's going on out there. This month, I can see 5 solar companies just searching on solar in the insolvency and liquidation databases. I can find 5 that fell over this month, August, 5 last month, 11 the month before. There was a couple of notable ones. Carl, we haven't chatted. I've chatted about them in the past, but do you remember M Square Energy? They were notable on companies who went out. They were the solar module manufacturing facility from New South Wales, Carl. You might have heard about them once or twice over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, right?
Did they ever really manage to get any decent market share? Probably not. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone broke.
No. And they always had a pretty strong export focus. So they were pumping stuff into Vietnam and the USA, if I'm not mistaken, through some connections involved in the business there. And they sort of did a little bit and set up a very basic line. I actually went and saw it. I rode there one day on my bike and went, I'm going to get this mystery out of the way. And I just knocked on the door and said, are you M Square Energy? Do you make solar panels? And they let me in and showed me their line. So I got to see their line, and they had what I would describe as a sort of 1979-ish rudimentary, pretty basic, cheap gear, secondhand out of China, throwing a few panels together and shipping it to their mates by the looks of it. But anyway, they've gone under, which is, frankly, look, good on them for having a go, but it was pretty shoddy from what I saw, and, they never really got anywhere in Australia. So shame.
It's bizarre.
When any company goes under. Everyone's trying to have a go, right? I respect that.
Bit of a musical chairs scenario. We were in China a couple of months ago. We went to a module manufacturer's plant, and within a couple of weeks, they were declaring that they were financially screwed. And I'm sure the number out the front of the $2 billion facility goes from something to something else. Somebody else buys it out. A game of musical chairs, and you just hope that you've got a seat when the music stops.
There's no shortage of stuff going on in the industry, that's for sure. Powerwall 3 was launched. Everyone I've spoken to is very excited about Powerwall 3. Yesterday I was out at Toongabbie and we're out at the bowling club out there, which was unreal. Had a really good event. Trade Zone and Catch Power collaborate on sort of pulling events together, and we got nearly 60-some people, I think, who turned up in the end. Great little day, great presentations, lots of good information and training for everyone, plenty of merch to, fill up your show bag. So good little event yesterday.
Sounds like you did better than I did. So Luke and I did a show at AC Solar Warehouse, talking to people about iStore heat pumps, solar inverters, and batteries. We probably had 20 people turned up. Didn't beat out the Trade Zone one, but at the end of the day,
it's also valuable, right? Now, we're waffling on, Karl. Unless you've got anything else that's massive, we should invite our guest to join us. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Our special guest today is one of the loveliest ladies I've met in solar. Leila Playmore has been in solar for almost 2 decades and with Selectronics for the last 3 years as a channel manager. Welcome to the podcast, Leila.
Thank you so much for having me, Nigel and Karl. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, you've got lots of exciting news, Leila. The whole industry sort of abuzz with your news. So let us have it.
Yeah, so yesterday was my last day with Selectronic.
Wow. And how long were you there?
3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a wonderful 3 years, and I've learnt so much in that time. It is time to take the next leap and to see where my career can go from here.
When I stalked you a little bit, Leila, and looked up your background, I didn't realise how long you'd been in the industry. You've been with ABB for years before Selectronic. You've got a really interesting sort of mix of technical and sales, and I've seen you market the pants off Selectronics. Give us a summary of how you got into solar and how you ended up here.
Well, it's very generous to say that I've been in solar for 20 years, but it's not quite right. I did an electrical apprenticeship and I worked as a sparky for 7 years. Then I sold electric motors. So I worked for TECO and then after that for ABB in their electric motors division. It was called then. It's called Motion these days. And I managed projects for them and did a lot of great stuff with them. I stopped work in the paid capacity to have my children, and I was out of that paid workforce for 7.5 years. I found myself in Darwin and also Karratha before Darwin, before I moved to Darwin. I saw a lot of diesel being burnt, and it really started the process for me to realize that the grid is really not green, and we don't know in the cities, we don't see the coal-fired power stations and we don't see the diesel generators.
Sure.
We're lucky enough to see the solar and roofs as that is coming along, but the grid is really, it needs some help.
It's so true. And when I was Googling today, because I started in off-grid, and I know there's a lot of people off-grid, and there's a lot of communities and huge number of Indigenous communities that rely on generation from diesels or other smaller generation stations. When I Googled it today and got the best stats I could and the most up-to-date stats I could, 500,000 Australians live off-grid, right?
Yes.
500,000. It's
Really?
a lot of, man, it's a lot of people. And even bigger, proportionally, it's a bigger share of Australia's electricity use because it's not particularly efficient in those small applications. So 6% of all of Australia's electricity use is in rural and remote areas, mostly on off-grid generation of some sort.
The crazy thing that even, in parts of Victoria, which you think are connected to the NEM, in order to milk cows or run machinery, people are burning diesel because the grid is insufficient.
So they just put generators in to give them a bigger capacity and get on with it.
Yeah, and yet there is a proven solution with Selectronic that's been, since the 90s, people have been putting in, probably even earlier, the really early adopters have been putting in solar and batteries.
I'll tell you one story about Selectronic that I love.
I would love to hear it.
In their history, because there's a lot of good stories we could tell about Selectronics. They've been around for so long. But I remember being visited in Nimbin by someone from Selectronics, and they gave a bit of a presentation on their products, and they explained that if you knew your products really well and you understood what they could do and you could articulate that to customers even when they were complex in a simple way, then you would be a successful salesperson. And that salesperson taught me that, and I have never ever forgotten it. That was 31 years ago. So all power to the awesome work of that little guy.
Who was that? Can you tell us?
That would have been Lindsay.
Yeah, Lindsay's an absolute legend.
He is a
He's
legend.
taught me so much in the last 3 years.
So much skill, that guy, and experience, and amazing. Yep.
Yeah.
Knows that off-grid market unbelievably. Carl, you were busting at the chops to say something about off-grid, and I rudely cut you off.
I was going to say, out of that 6%, surely there's some that's not off-grid as we know it, which is solar and battery. That's off-grid as in, as you just say, diesel generators running mine sites. Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah, look, people's homes, people's businesses. I mean, I can remember when I was living in Karratha, we did a drive up to Broome with my children, and we stopped at a place called 80 Mile Beach, and it's absolutely in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful. There is a big mine nearby, which is Sandfire, and there's a caravan park right on the beach, and you've just got 80 miles of beach with nothing but you and the sunset, and it's just
Beautiful part of
gorgeous.
the world.
And some little crabs, yeah?
Yeah. And my mother was with us, and there was the hum of air conditioners all night long, which I'm very used to, having lived in Karratha. You know, it's 40 degrees at 8 o'clock in the morning in Karratha. But there is also the hum of diesel generators. And I hadn't actually noticed it, but my mother pointed it out that the diesel generators were running all the time.
Yeah.
Interesting. Darwin, announcement this week as well, or at least in the last 2 weeks, Sun Cable is going ahead, and Darwin's going to get.
Oh, that's amazing.
gigawatts.
Yeah, that was talked about back when I was there.
They reached another milestone. They got a whole bunch of approvals through for the project to go to the next level. It'll still take a long time. It's still a massive project with hurdles ahead, I'm sure. But yeah, another huge milestone for them, which is just going to be unreal because it's obvious it's just going to be sensational.
It's my segue into my next career, Nigel. I've threatened to do this before, but I've said when Sun Cable gets up, I should move to the Northern Territory and buy a pie van.
A pie van.
That's it, mate. There's going to be a lot of people that want a pie and a Northern Territory Big M.
A solar pie van. Go for it.
That's it.
So, Leila, I mean, you've done a whole lot of really fascinating things in this space, but I was really interested in digging in. While you were at Cell Electronics, particularly, because that's your, sort of recent history, amazing company, amazing pedigree, amazing Australian story. Now that you're walking away, what's the one thing that stands out that you just went, this is why I'm in the solar industry. This is why this is so cool. This is how we help people. What's the one thing that stands out for you?
Some of the people in the industry were lucky enough to come along to the Cell Electronic grand opening. The Cell Electronic story before I started, has got a long history. But during COVID, they had some troubles. The lease expired on the factory that they had occupied for some 15 years in Churnside Park, and they were homeless, and they needed a new place, and they got themselves a premises in Wanturna.
Yep.
And so we had a grand opening, and mind you, they tried to have that grand opening 4 times, but it couldn't happen because of COVID. And finally,
I remember. Yeah. I was there. It was a great party, but boy, yeah, it was a tricky invite to get right.
It did end up being the super spreader, unfortunately, because we were still in the throes of COVID.
But it, didn't they? Yeah.
They did.
But it was all worth it. It was totally worth it. I think everyone who was there, and even people who I spoke to afterwards who did get a bit crook, all went totally worth it.
It was the most amazing night, and we put in so much work to get that up. There was the industry band with Lindsay and some people from the industry, and they were singing the Cell Electronic song. And if you haven't heard the Cell Electronic song, then you have to go to the Cell Electronic website.
Maybe Luke can put a link on the end of the episode or something so that everyone can log on.
That would be
certainly sing a couple of bars.
Yeah, give us a couple of bars.
Oh gosh.
Or your duties.
It's in what we do. It's in who we are. Oh gosh, I know. I can't think of it right now. You've really put me on the spot, but it's a beautiful song. And look, the first time I heard it,
word for it. Come on, give us.
It's about as a footballer, the national anthem at the grand final.
Oh, look, it's got everything. On the wings of the cockatoo we ride. It is completely nostalgic, and you've got to hear it because it just tells the story of Selectronic. It started in a shed in the backyard, and it's the ultimate
Yep.
small business become big. Yeah, 60 years this year.
Yep.
They performed the song live on the night,
I remember.
but Alka and I, who was our then marketing manager, we got to hear it a couple of days beforehand, and hearing that song for the first time, Alka and I just cried. It was
I
so
bet.
moving.
It was legit, and they're a good band too, you know.
Yeah.
It was actually a really, really lovely moment. That's one of the things that's so nice about this industry, especially with, companies like Selectronic have been around for decades and decades and decades and decades. These people, we've
Mm.
grown up with each other's kids and grandkids, so it's lovely to see. So, wonderful few years at Selectronics, amazing company to be with. You cut your teeth in all sorts of interesting industrial applications, which I didn't even know about, and I'm embarrassed about that. But what's next, Leila? Have you got a plan, or are you just taking some time out?
Oh, it really is a massive question mark, Nigel. I don't know where I'll end up. I'm very hopeful that it will be in the renewable space. But yes, at the moment, mostly I just want to have a break, spend some time with my kids, have a
Yeah.
bit of fun. I've joined a choir. So sorry I
Nice.
couldn't sing for you very well earlier, but it's been one of my dreams
You're
to
digging a deeper hole there, Leila. We're going to have to
Yeah.
get you to vocalize now that you've told us. Not only do you know the song, you can recall that because you're in a choir, so you can sing.
the singing in the choir thing is very much something you do in a massive group. I'll be
Ah,
singing with, between 200 and 400 other people.
not in a corner on a gloomy afternoon where we've got you today. Okay, we'll let you off the
Yeah, not
hook.
not
We'll let
solo,
you off
not
the hook.
solo. Yeah.
We're
Well,
probably pretty
speaking
much.
of which, that is news, Nigel. So Luke and I were on Glenn Morris's podcast
Oh, you
last
were.
week. Yeah, that was pretty exciting. And although I didn't get an invite to go on Pat's podcast, Luke went on Pat's podcast,
I saw
and
that.
Jack Longy Long went on there as well.
Oh, I haven't watched the Longy one yet. What did you do wrong? How'd you offend him, mate?
Oh,
Why'd you
good
get booted?
question. I don't know. Didn't get
I'm
an invite.
sure it's pending, Carl. Don't stress. It's just pending.
There's
Luke was
only
great.
so many hours in the day that I can indulge these fantasy second careers of being a singer or a
Well
movie
put.
star.
Very good. Carl, we're pretty much out of time, so I'm just going to do a quick wrap around for the end of the episode, mate. Got any parting words? What's big on your agenda in the next few weeks?
I don't have anything in particular, but very happy to see that Sun Cable is moving along. Even if that doesn't look like battery storage and a cable, it didn't make any sense not to build the solar farm to feed Darwin. So that one's very exciting for me. Of course, the huge penetration of renewables wouldn't have happened without wind. The ongoing nuclear debate in various forums and such. My 2 cents there is that anytime you build one nuclear reactor, you have to build two. So you need some redundancy, and there's some economies of scale of putting two in one spot, but it still leaves you with 3 gigawatts. And ultimately, it's 30 times the price of wind. So wind's the
And
heavy hitter.
as we know, 2.3 gigawatts of curtailed wind and solar the other day, so makes 0 sense.
Well, I saw another clown saying that we needed that spinning reserve, and that inverters created lots of harmonic noise and so on and so forth that caused the grid all pain and suffering. And you're like,
Yeah, they do.
hang on a minute, people. We're providing all of those frequency response services through batteries now.
Better and faster already.
Better, faster, beautiful
Cheaper.
looking. Yeah, all of those things. So
Yep. I'm excited too, Carl. I'm excited. Leila, what's got you excited? Obviously you've got a change of everything, change of life coming up because you're changing roles. But
Yeah.
what to next?
Oh gosh, well, yeah, I'm open to offers, I suppose. Today I went to a women in electrical luncheon, and I hope to keep networking and promoting Australian women in solar, which is what I did today. Not officially, but I'm sure Bobby and the rest of the Australian women in solar will be very happy that I flew the flag for them today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd really like to, this is electrical industry has been my career. It's where I started and it's where I continue to be and I continue to love. And the cutting edge of electrical is renewable energy,
Sure is.
renewable, sustainable solar. I mean, come on, let's do it.
I'm with you, Layla. I'm with you. I'm the most excited I've been in decades, actually, at the moment because of what's going on in the industry and the technology that's coming out now. And we're just having a field day with new stuff that we're seeing emerge and trying to do ourselves like everyone else is as well. So it's a cool space at the moment. Lumpy and bumpy in terms of
Yeah.
getting people to spend money, but we're nearly there, and we've got some cool stuff behind it. Some interesting programs starting to roll out, and new regs and blah blah, new standards that came out. There's so much that we could dive into.
We didn't
Yeah,
talk about that. How can we not talk about the new
or
4777,
triple
Nigel?
seven, exactly. Well, there you go, Carl. We are
First,
now.
first question I got was, is there anything that I need to do differently in order to be able to do my 1,000-volt strings? And the answer to that is you've already been doing them because AS 5033 was released, 2 years ago. So all of those things around protection of DC cables and disconnection points, et cetera, are what we've already been doing. So we're good to go.
That's the same, but you can presumably start wiring up in bigger strings now than for some situations, right?
Oh, look, single
No
phase.
biggie, no biggie.
Single phase not going to make a lot of difference. So at the
Yeah,
end of the day, the inverters really aren't designed or don't need to be designed to deal with more than about 600 volts, simply because you need 380 volts DC to make a 240-volt sine wave. So
yep,
by having significantly higher voltages, you need to buck the voltages back down again. And that's a sacrifice in efficiency. So there's no point doing it, just wire shorter strings. But in that domestic space, 3-phase gives you a lot of flexibility.
that's
Can
it.
effectively run
More
a lot,
flexibility. That's the best thing about it. Just gives you the
yeah,
ability to play around more and have a little bit more room to move within the rules. So
particularly with the low current inputs of inverters that were really designed for commercial use. And of course,
yeah,
as domestic solar is getting bigger and bigger, of
yep,
course, the right size solar system is one that fills the roof.
yep.
But it's hard if you've got to do 3 separate strings as opposed to one string that fits inside the current limits of the inverters.
Yeah, it's true. I was in Brisbane recently for the Smart Energy Council one-day event, which was actually a cracker event. It was about roughly double the size of last year, so that's good. It's only small, but it was actually pretty good. We had a little booth there and a flat chat, and all the speaking halls were pretty much full. I gave a little presentation on EVs, Carl, you'd be proud to know. I was on at 9 a.m. in the morning in one of they had a little session out in the middle of the hall where everyone got to wear disco earphones, like a silent disco. So it was right in the middle of the hall, which is kind of cool. But I was banging on about all the EV stuff that we're seeing now, because the Queensland government and regulators in particular are really starting to push and crack down quite hard now on the requirements for EV charge communications, I guess, to make sure that if the network needs to turn those charges down or off, you got 3 options, from super stupid to super cool, basically.
Well, it's not like you can hide that, can you, Nigel? So if you turn on a 7.4 kilowatt load randomly or at a set time, it's easy for someone to ping you. And obviously the requirement in Queensland is 20 amps, not 32.
Correct.
So,
And in fact, the regulatory guys were talking about the fact that they've already worked out that it's pretty easy for them to see that in the footprint of the demand on the site. And so they'll be able to work out very, very quickly and ask the question of the owner or the installer. Say, hey, we think there's an EV charger here. But it's not registered. Are you really charging an EV? Because you need to be bloody registered, and it's the law. Just to finish off for me, I'm watching this stuff all now just magically orchestrate together like witchcraft. It's just bizarre. Hot water systems, EV chargers, solar batteries, amber wholesale pricing and regulatory change sitting over the top of it, where they're ramping it up and down. South Australia had an event recently where they did a whole lot of dynamic testing on dynamic sites. So this is very, very real now. And of course, Victoria's coming in 30 days, Karl. You got 30 days until the backstop is a regulation in Victoria, and every single new solar system under about 200 kilowatts, if I'm not mistaken, needs to have the ability to be backstop triggered if the networks receive a signal that says you need to ramp down that solar to keep our voltages under control.
It's funny. We did have an internal meeting about this last week, Nigel, and it's still quite clunky. So literally it's a case of someone at SP AusNet sending someone an email at Fronius, SMA, iStore, Sungrow. It's pretty agricultural, and then we've got to reach in and pull the throttle back.
That's right.
It's still somewhat agricultural, but
it is. But you know what was highlighted to me now is that with CSIP, that which is basically the sort of structural design of how to get those messages in and out of inverters to throttle solar and batteries back, and demand in the case of Queensland. CSIP is this just basically it's a common language, and it requires a server at the other end that can receive and send signals to tell us or tell them what's going on. And it's pretty bloody cool to see it rolling out, really, because it's straightforward. It's this common protocol, and once you've got it under control, you can just flip things on and off and do all sorts of amazing things. It's blowing my mind, Karl. Blowing my mind.
Oh, well, considering all the chaos we went through, 5 or 6 years ago to get DRM stuff, DRM controllers, and the other shit show, of course, was the earth fault alarms, and we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I've forgotten all about the earth fault alarms.
What happens these days? I actually saw it on a forum the other day. Do I have to have my inverter connected to the internet? And I said, well, yeah, you do.
In Victoria, you do.
Can't measure. Think it's important. If you need Starlink, you need Starlink. That's
right. Get a connection. There's lots of ways to do it. We're having loads of good conversations about it. But listen, we're out of time, so I'm gonna wrap it up. We've heard closing statements from everyone. Thanks, Karl. Thanks, Leila.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, listeners, for joining us for another episode of Just Another Solar Podcast. Don't forget to give us a like and a share. It makes a really huge difference. So please hit the buttons, and we'll talk to you next time.